welcome to the Roundtable Podcast. I am Shogun. Today is a very special episode indeed. Joining me for the second time on the podcast is my ex-wife and one of my best friends, Andi Sharma, also known as Karuna Sharma. She is a senior policy analyst with the Government of Canada. She is also the pilot of a small two-person aircraft called Katanas. And she has in the past, among other accomplishments, flown many pounds of food up north to remote northern Canadian communities, which was her own vision that she manifested by getting the idea, learning how to fly planes, and actually flying up north. So we're going to talk about that. We'll also discuss our UFO experience we shared together. And in the end, we will address the illegal and toxic slander and libel perpetuated by the band members Too High and Saigo, which was not only slandering myself, but also her. So in order to put that to rest and show anyone who cares to know the truth that those were lies and that what you're about to hear from the woman that they are talking about is the truth, which also, of course, will show that nothing they say should ever be taken seriously because you're about to see what liars they are. But I want to reiterate, that's only the end. That's not the point of this podcast. This podcast was scheduled before all this bullshit. And it's been coming a long time. So it's mostly going to be on those topics. That being said, make sure you've joined us on the Roundtable Discord server. Also follow and subscribe YouTube and BitChute. You can find over 250 episodes of our podcast. Also hashtag RT Podcast. Keep an eye on announcements for upcoming events. 8 p.m. today, episode on Gematria, which is Hebrew numerology. Very cool. Tomorrow, interview with the legendary Blackfeathers about survivalism and doomsday prep. That will be at 9 p.m. Central. Without further ado, welcome, Andi. I will continue to call myself Shogun, but we will call you Andi for the duration of the podcast. Thank you for joining me, and how are you?
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm doing all right. It's a lovely day here today. How are you, Shogun?
I'm great, thank you. It's actually not such a lovely day in Winnipeg. We had a little bit of an overnight storm last night, so there's some snow on the ground, but up till then it had been sunny and warm. And I think this is probably the last winter before we get our spring and summer, so I'm excited. So first of all, you moved to Ontario recently, and you're living in Ontario now. We won't discuss your current work, but how are you enjoying working and living in Ontario?
It's really it's awesome. This is the first time that I've lived outside of Manitoba since I moved to the country in 1997. So yeah, big change, and this is a beautiful part of this country. It's stunning, actually. So yeah, it's lovely, and work is great. I'm only a couple months into the new role, but the people are wonderful, and it's a good experience.
That's great. And you recently adopted a puppy named Luna. We saw her.
Yeah.
How is Luna doing? What's new with her?
She's good. She was a little bit stressed with the move, but she's great. Yeah, we're working on rolling over as a trick this week, so fingers
Awesome.
crossed.
That's great. As I said, if I am successful in my military application, which was finalized a few days ago, then
Oh,
hopefully I'll
nice.
be going to Quebec for officer school. And if so, then Guffey, of course, will be coming to live with you and Luna. So I think he's going to be ecstatic because, as you know, he always preferred you to me, even though he's become friends with me.
Yeah.
He was more of a mommy's boy.
Yeah. Oh, I missed him.
Yeah. So just for some background, Karuna, her real name or given name is Karuna. Her used name is Andi, so we call her Andi. She and I met when I was 18 and she was 19. We met at, was it an Armin van Buuren concert or a Benny Benassi concert?
Armin van Buuren.
Right. So we went to an Armin van Buuren concert. We had all the same friends. I was invited to the party. She was invited to the party. We'd both been in the same circle all this time, but somehow we'd never met each other. We were standing in the line. This is my story of meeting you. And I saw this really pretty girl in front of me who was wearing a little bit of a crop top and had a really nice tummy. So it got my attention. And she saw me looking at her, but didn't realize I was with the same group of friends. So we were both checking each other out. And then we found out we were with the same group. Again, I was drinking and trying to work up the courage to ask you to dance, which I've never really done, asked a girl to dance, but I knew I wanted to. And then right when I was getting ready to do it, you came up and asked me to dance. And I was like, wow, she just asked me to dance. I was about to ask her. And we were having a good time that night. And we danced, and that was it. It was basically love at first sight. And as you know, the second time we got together, about a week later, you moved in with me, and we lived together for over a decade. First at my mother's house and father's house. We lived together there by ourselves for the summer. Then we went and lived with your sister. And then after that, we went to the apartment that I got with the Shirk, which was a big scholarship I got. We lived there. And then we inherited a house through your family. We lived there until we got divorced. We got divorced about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, or at least separated, and the divorce finalized. But we made the decision to remain best friends or good friends. And I'm certainly really glad we've done that. And we've talked on a daily basis and hung out on a weekly basis ever since. And I actually probably will be in the same city and we'll be able to stay in touch. So, first of all, is that pretty accurate as you recall it?
Yeah, down to the letter.
Mm-hmm. So there was no time during our marriage or after in which you were, for example, homeless.
No, not when I met you, and I moved in with you. I had already like gotten permanent accommodations with Jen's grandma, as you'll remember. But before that, prior to me living with Jen's grandma, which was a very generous offer, I was couch surfing. But I didn't know you then.
Well, exactly. So one of the slanders that people have been saying is that either I made you homeless or you became homeless because of me or that we were homeless together, which of course none of that is true because when I met you, you were already living with Jen or Laura. Those were two people you were spending time with. But I just wanted to address that as part of our biography, but also pointing out that here is the first of many lies, right? You were never homeless with me. I paid for the whole quite nice condo we had. I think it was on River or apartment with the Shirk. And we
Yeah,
always
well,
living.
definitely. Yeah. In fact, when I met you was when my life stabilized because I got permanent housing. Because as you know, I moved into your parents' home.
Well, right. And we might as well jump to the core of the issue, right? So, in that interview that people posted, you're talking about your experience with addiction and recovery. And you're very courageous and open and transparent about those things, as I am, because we know that our story is a story of success. It's a story of two people falling in love, getting off drugs, becoming sober together, getting our master's degrees together, graduating on the same day together, both getting jobs in the government together, getting a house together, living together for 10 years, traveling the whole world, and to this day, being clean and sober, working for the government. And it's a total success story. Now, the story that Saigo and Tuhai have been trumpeting around illegally and ridiculously is that I abused you physically, sexually, and mentally for 12 years, forced you into homelessness, and drove you to drugs and alcohol, and that you became addicted to drugs because of my abuse, that I gave you STDs and pimped you out and physically beat you for 10 years. So just to clear the air, can you address any of those claims? Is there any truth to any of
Hello?
that, even from the longest stretch of the imagination? Did you freeze? I can't, that's bizarre. Are you there?
Hello?
Hi, I can't see your video anymore. Can you leave and rejoin and I'll do the same? Oh, now I can see you. I'm sorry. Uh, can you see me? Can you say something? Yeah, you froze for a
Yes, I
second.
can
So
see and hear
wait,
you
I
now.
don't know if you
Okay,
were
sorry.
so frozen still that I thought your video froze or if it actually did freeze.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I lost you there. So I missed the last question, but I'm back now.
You heard what I said, right? They claim publicly, and I have screenshots, they've been posting this, that I physically abused you. Like they call me a wife beater. They say I beat you for 10 years. I pimped
Ridiculous.
you up, that I gave you STDs, right? That I drove you to drugs and alcohol, and I made you homeless. Is there any
Uh,
truth to that? And can you tell
well,
us the truth from your point of view, right? Just tell us the truth from your point of view about that, if that's okay, just to get that
yeah,
out of the way. I'm sure everyone here knows that that is a subtext to this interview, and rather than leave it for the end, we might as well just deal with the elephant in the room and then move on from there with some common sense.
sure. Yeah, I can categorically say, like unequivocally, that that is all very untrue. In fact, it is so untrue to the point of absurdity and couldn't be more opposite than what the truth actually is. So, um, I'll recount my experience of our relationship together just so folks can, yeah, have an understanding of how it really went. So I'll reiterate it now, and I've said this, like I said, in a lot of media interviews, because it's such a critical piece of my story, is that Shogun saved my life. When I met him, I was spiraling out of control, already addicted to cocaine. It was, and but you're young, and so we partied for a couple years, and ultimately, he was the reason that I eventually had the strength and support to get clean and sober, which was pivotal for my life. I was a university dropout, like I said. I was homeless long before meeting Shogun. When I met him is when my life stabilized, and yeah, just in a really dark and terrible place. And then I met this person who believed in me and loved me so much that he showed me how to love myself, and that was like the most critical piece of my journey to sobriety and healing. And it was that he really showed me that I was worthy of love, and he showed me that by loving me unconditionally. So I would say that was the impetus, definitely, for my journey to sobriety, and I certainly couldn't have done that. He was there step by step of the way, and there was a lot of ups and downs. Anybody who is listening to this will know that any road to recovery is very difficult. It's not a linear progression. There are a million steps backwards and maybe a half step forward. And he was very patient and loving and caring through that whole time. And eventually I would manage to kick my habit. And then during that time, he, he believed in me so much. I didn't believe myself out, so I written myself, but he encouraged me and supported me, and me do the application and got me to finish my degree. So I went to counseling, got back into university, finished my undergrad, and then again with his support, I was able to apply to and get accepted to my master's. And he basically taught me how to all of the skills that I needed to succeed in university. Shogun taught me over years of coaching, patient, loving coaching, and now I'm, if I can say, I'm an
Andy, I've lost you. Can you guys hear me? Dawson?
you.
Yes.
Yeah. Should I maybe suggest you just leave and rejoin the room really quickly, and that will reset your internet just to make sure everything you're saying is coming through clear. Is that okay?
Sure, no
Exit and
problem. I can do that right now.
connection because it's currently roboting a little bit. I don't want anything you're saying to be lost. Don't worry, Annabelle, these are non-alcoholic. So currently, Andy is doing little blue squares.
How's that?
Sorry, please continue. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
No, that's okay. I'm really sorry about my internet connection. If I go downstairs, it might be better.
It's actually working quite well. It was only ring there. So it's okay. I'll tell you roboting. I just thought reconnecting usually fixes it. So if you can just continue, don't worry. It seems to be okay. I'll let you know if it's not. If anyone else notices a big problem, please, like Dawson, just speak up and let us know. But you sound good and I can see you clearly.
Awesome. And you can send me a text message if I, for some reason, can't hear you telling me that connection's bad. I should get a text.
So if anytime there's an issue, just DM her, please, and let her know. So sorry, please continue. You were talking about school, how you got your master's degree, and how you are now gone from literally not being able to do academic writing, and by your own hard work and discipline, as well as my coaching, but mostly your own hard work, you have not only gotten a master's degree, and I was present at your thesis defense, right? I remember when I won't tell the whole story, but I was there at your thesis defense, and you did a great job. And since then, of course, you've become a senior policy analyst with the Government of Canada, which is something we want to talk about. This is a big deal, right? I work for the provincial government. Your classification is higher than mine substantially. I've often said, as I think everybody knows, that if you chose to, you could easily become the Prime Minister of Canada or close to it, right? There's absolutely no reason that's not an achievable goal for you. And so that is a real testament, right? You went from an addict using cocaine and alcohol with transient housing to a potential future prime minister. And to be honest, I'll confirm your story. Your story, like mine, is one of two lost souls falling in love and turbocharging each other in a positive direction, where we quit drugs and alcohol together. We got our master's degrees together. We started working for the government together. We traveled the world together. We went to Switzerland, Antigua, Trinidad, Tobago, Nicaragua, Belgium, Germany, Italy, I can't even remember everywhere that we went, right? I was doing my application and having to list all these things. And of course, you helped me with that. You still help me with everything. So she said a lot about how much else I've helped her. She's helped me more than I could ever say. She helps me with everything in my life. Like, I would be so lost without the help she's given me. So I just want to say how evil it is for people to take a happy story like this about two people who truly loved each other and then go around saying I abused her, or I beat her, or I gave her STDs, or I drove her to drugs and alcohol, or I made her homeless, because this is a good story, and all of those are lies. And I just want to repeat that Saigo and Tuhai said all these things knowing they weren't true. And you just need to ask yourself, what kind of person would do that? Not a good person, and not someone whose opinion you should listen to. And I'm glad that we got that out, because this is the truth. And it's a good, beautiful truth. And the lie is ugly, and the lie is false. So let the lie die here. And remember that the same people who are telling you this lie are the same people telling you all the other lies you hear about me. It's the same people, and it's coming from the same place, right? None of it is true. Here's the evidence. So again, Andi, have I ever had an STD?
No.
Have I ever given you an STD?
No.
Have I ever beaten you?
No.
Have I ever pimped you out or abused you or exploited you in any way?
No. Never, ever, ever.
Is it fair to say that we've remained friends and we are indeed more than friends, and perhaps you might say close friends or best friends?
Absolutely. And will be forever.
And you know that I love you, and I will always
Yes.
love you.
Yeah,
And I
same. And that's why it's so beautiful.
mm-hmm. So thank you for getting that out there. I think it's a true, beautiful story. And as is so often the case, what these other people do, their evil forces something good to happen. So I never intended to show my face. I never intended for anyone to know who Shogun was. I never intended for anyone to know my name or who my ex-wife was. But people doxed me, right? They found her information and released it on video. On the Den and other servers, they posted her name and face. And of course, that doxes me. So here we are, me, my name, you know it. Her name, you know it. She's Karuna Sharma. I'm Daniel Church. She's my ex-wife. I'm a citizen of Canada. I work for the provincial government. I have a master's degree. I have 4 degrees, a 4.0 GPA. I am the recipient of the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council Joseph Armand Bombardier Canada Graduate Fellowship, the most prestigious scholarship in social sciences you can get at the master's level in Canada. I competed at in jiu-jitsu, and I go to Gracie Humeda, right? I trained at TriStar. In other words, everything I've told you has always been true. Now you know it's a fact. So all the lies, right, that I'm a human trafficker, that I'm a Russian spy, that I'm a police officer, that I'm an intelligence agent, that I am a human, a blue blood or a Mason or a cannibal or a Satanist or a murderer or a rapist or a wife beater, it's all bullshit. This is me. This is my ex-wife. We are public figures. We have no criminal records, no speeding tickets, no parking tickets. I mean, she does. I
Yeah,
don't.
I do.
So now the truth is out. I'm a public figure. It wasn't my choice. I was maliciously doxxed. But again, the only reason I concealed my identity was so that the roundtable would be less of a cult of personality. Because one of the criticisms has been it's a cult, a Shogun cult, right? So I've tried to keep myself out of it so that people would notice how great the server was and pay less attention to me. But in order to try and hurt the server, people try to focus on me. And their thinking was that I have some horrible secrets, or I'm some kind of predator who can be exposed, or I have some dirty secrets. And if you expose them, my reputation and my cult following would collapse. Unfortunately for them, everything I've said is true. There is no such secrets. Everything they said has now been exposed as lies. And the only consequence is that you can actually hear this really happy and inspiring story of addiction recovery, which is totally part and parcel of what the whole server is about, right? What Andi does and what I do, being open about our struggles with addiction and mental health. We do it to support other people who have mental illnesses, to show them that you can recover and be successful. This is a happy story. There is no dirty underbelly here. There is no grimy secrets. In fact, what we had is true love. It was love at first sight, and it was a romance really for the ages. Multiple people came up to us and said, I never knew true love existed until I saw you. I didn't ever think love was a real thing. I never knew love like that was possible. People said, I got married because of you, right? Seeing you guys fall in love and get married inspired multiple of our friends to decide to get married. We weren't just married happily. We were an example of a marriage that very few people will ever see. I don't necessarily know I'll ever find it again. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But what I know is most people will never have what we had. And not only that, we wrote our divorce agreement when we were still happily married. We foresaw that we might break up someday and created a post-nuptial agreement, which we actually followed, right? So we had already written down how we were going to break up. And when we broke up, we didn't call lawyers. There was no divorce. There was no court. We met at my place. We put on a Trevor Hall song, The Lime Tree. We drank wine. We smoked weed. And we signed the divorce papers, right? And she honored her obligations and I did mine, right? So it wasn't even just an example of a relationship beautiful at the beginning, beautiful in the middle. It was really beautiful in the end. And it didn't end. Here she is. The relationship continues. I wish her the best in all things, right? And she supports me in all ways. So for people to try and use her as a weapon against me was very foolish, because she
It
is
didn't make any sense.
in my hand, right? She is my greatest ally. And to try and use her as an enemy was a foolish mistake, which finally gave me the chance to show that these people are liars. Because their narrative is, look, everybody says this about Shogun. 40 people says he beat his wife. It has to be true. Well, there's only one person whose opinion matters about whether I beat my wife, and that's my wife. And the only other
Yeah.
person whose opinion matters is me. And here we are, side by side, face by face, saying, fuck you, you fucking lying pussies. Okay? So this is the thing. Truth doesn't have to fear lies. Slander doesn't have to scare people who aren't keeping secrets. And you can't take down a good and positive thing through false lies. It's never going to work. God doesn't allow it. So I would like to just take a minute out of this podcast, because I do know that Too High and Saigo will certainly, be listening to this and hearing about this. And I know that Saigo and Too High both consider themselves Christians, right? They both pretend, at least, that they follow Christ. So I'd like to take a minute to read some scripture. Again, what we've established is that both of them did two things. They committed slander and they bore false witness. So let's see what God promises to those who do that. A false witness will not go unpunished, nor will a liar escape. Proverbs 19:5. Whoever secretly slanders his neighbor, him I will destroy. The one who has a haughty heart and proud heart, haughty look and proud heart, him I will not endure. Psalms 105. A false witness will not go unpunished, and he who pours out lies will not go free. Proverbs 19:5. A false witness shall not be unpunished, and he that speaks lies shall perish. Proverbs 19:9. Whoever privately slanders his neighbor, him will I cut off. Okay? So people who do this particular crime are promised a particular punishment. They are called stupid by God. They are called liars. They are told they will be cut off, destroyed, they will perish, right? And they will not escape punishment. So I have now proven to you guys all, beyond any doubt, that they bore false witness and that they slandered. So they both claim to be Christians. Well, here's what the Bible promises. You will be destroyed. You are cut off by God. This is not my word or my judgment. It is the judgment of the Lord. And his scripture is sure, and his promises are true, right? And never fail to come down. So that's all I had to say about that. I don't know if she must have had a...
Hi.
Hi, sorry about that. So that was just something I wanted to include, because I'm a Christian and faith matters to me. And part of the podcast was to address those people. And I know they're going to hear that. So that was for those two people specifically. So I apologize for that distraction. And now that that's out of the way, I'd like to get onto some more positive topics. Do you still have a little bit of time?
Yep.
Okay. So let's talk briefly about your work with the Government of Canada as a senior policy analyst. Can you just describe in general terms for people who don't know what that means and what it's like? Just what does a senior policy analyst do?
Sure. So in my current role, I work for the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, and I'm leading the development of the diversity and inclusion and equity strategy for that organization. But this is a very new role, so I don't have a ton to say about it, except that it's wonderful. The people are amazing and doing really important work. But I did spend the last 13 years as a senior analyst with the provincial government of Manitoba, and I can speak much more about that. But generally, the roles are the same. It's we're looking at different social policies, and um, in that case, and I had expertise in food security, northern food security in particular. And so the policy work that I was really involved in was all about northern food security. How can we support rural and remote communities in Canada? And I'm not sure how many folks listening right now or to this are Canadian, but are rural and remote communities. Like Manitoba is a vast, vast province, and you can some communities would have to take a boat, take a train, and then also drive in order to get groceries. And then that could take up to 3 days, depending on where you are. So just to give you a sense of the vastness and why there would be food insecurity in those situations. Anyway, so all of that to say, senior policy analysis, in my experience, really was revolving around understanding the context of the policy landscape that both hinders and enables food security in northern Manitoba. I'm trying to fix the problem.
So basically, you and I live in a country where one of the major issues is the indigenous population, what we call First Nations people, live in reservations and remote northern communities which don't have good road access. They don't have good water. They live often in what we might think of as third world or deprived conditions, even though they're in Canada. They're actually separate nations, and those nations are not doing well. And Canada, of
Yeah.
course.
Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt, but just on that point, I came across this phrase recently. It's called the fourth world. So it's third world living conditions in the first world. And I find that to be a perfect descriptor of the state of affairs.
Yes, great. So obviously, this is meaningful work, and that was something I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about. Not only are you doing this work for the government in a professional capacity, you also do a lot of charitable work, and you have been an activist. That's something I haven't done. You were always more of the activist in our relationship, and you motivated me, right? We used to do work for CPAWS, the Canadian Park and Wilderness Society. That was you. I was coming because you wanted to, and we used to sit there and get people sign stuff. So but I care deeply about the environment, and I think we share a lot of social values. And another thing I wanted to point out about our relationship is you are an atheist, right? And you
Yep.
don't believe in God, and you don't believe in religion, and you never have. And as everybody knows, I am very Christian. I was reading Bible verses a few minutes ago, right? So another reason it's an inspiring story is because I think it shows that it doesn't really matter if you believe in God or not, if you share social and political and moral values, right? She's a good person, a better person than I am, right? And
Yeah.
does a lot of good work. So I want you to talk a bit about that good work, what your main causes are, what kind of, is your priority that's motivating you in the past, but also right now, in terms of what you'd like to change about the world.
Sure, I can speak to that a little bit. For I think the majority of my since I got clean and sober, I have pretty much dedicated my life to giving back to community in every way, just because it just felt like a right thing to do once I was in a position to do that. I guess also because Shogun, you live that life and you see those things, you just want to give back, right? So anyway, the main things, and actually it's your passion for the environment inspired me to volunteer for CPAWS. So I still actually volunteer for CPAWS, if you can believe that. I sit on the board now, but yeah, when you and me started volunteering for CPAWS back in God 2007 or 2008, yeah, so that's something that's very near and dear to my heart. CPAWS is the Canadian Parks and Wilderness Society in Manitoba, and what we do in that organization is well, they've dedicated their entire organization to protecting Manitoba's wildlands and our boreal forest. So in Manitoba, we have this really weird situation where uh, provincial parks, can still be logged by commercial companies, and that's one of the main things that CPAWS is trying to work against is setting aside land that cannot be touched by logging interests. So that's one thing. Another thing that's really, really important to me, as you can imagine, given our shared history, I sit on the board for the Main Street Project in Winnipeg, and the Main Street Project is the largest homeless shelter in the city, and we really pride ourselves on being the only shelter. It's called a wet shelter, which means that we don't turn away people if you're seeking support and housing. if you are currently intoxicated, and that doesn't exist. In fact, I think the model was pretty new, not only for Manitoba, because we're the only one that do it, but across the country as well. There's very, very few wet shelters. And but we work with our sister agencies, the dry shelters. So that's your Salvation Army, that's your Shalom Mission, the primary Christian and Jewish sister agencies to ours, which is not what's the word, secular. So yeah, so that's a really important cause that lately has been, yeah, um, sparking my fire, I guess you could say. And then other things, a million other things. In my aviation industry, I am a member of the Manitoba 99s. Actually, I'll be switching my affiliation now that I'm living in Ontario, but and that was an organization that was created by Amelia Earhart herself, and it's for female pilots, and it's something that I'm super passionate about. If there's any women listening to this right now, if you have ever thought about, or maybe you haven't even thought about, the fact that you can be a pilot, and there's tons of resources out there to support you to make that goal, because currently in the world, and this is shocking to me, um, only 3% of pilots in the world are female. 3% out of all the pilots in the world are female. I mean, we should be 50-50. And so anyway, I'm very passionate about that. And for the ladies listening, or female identifying folks listening, if you're interested, reach out. I have tons of great resources for you. Um, yeah, I guess those are the major buckets. You could say I probably have loads other, but maybe I'll stop there.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's a lot. And I mean, I think you have received a huge amount of recognition and praise for your accomplishments and your work. There's a very good reason for that. You are essentially a celebrity in Manitoba, and I would say in Canada. You have been featured, I think, in magazines, definitely in newspapers. I mean, I'm your ex-husband, and I can't keep track of all the times you've been given accolades. I know I could try and remember them, but it won't be unhumble for you to list them as you can remember them properly. What are some of the times you've been honored, or times you've been asked to speak, times you've been featured in newspapers? I mean, I'm sorry I don't remember them all myself, but there are
No,
many
that's
of them.
okay. It is
Mhm.
it's an awkward thing to do to make a list.
Okay, well, let me tell you then for you. So she has been featured in all these things, right? Because what was it? Top 40 under 40 was one of them, right? Top 40 upcoming Canadians under 40 years of age, was that one of them?
Yeah,
So
that was
just
one. CBC had a really cool competition, and this was a couple years ago now. But yeah, CBC's top 40 under 40, that was fun. Yeah.
Okay, well, the
The
point is,
coolest.
that's you've been honored and you have a lot more to do. I also feel a lot more call now with my own, coming back to Christianity, and for that reason and through that, to be more active, to do more good in the world, to help those in need and be a servant, of the creation and of God's children and so forth. And one thing I thought would be cool is the Roundtable is, among other things, a not-for-profit charity organization. So far we've raised a couple $1,000s, and we reallocated them on a one-to-one basis to people in the server who are homeless or in a need, things like that. What I'd like to do in the coming year is choose actual charities that are really good, or well chosen, and use our server's benevolent fundraising capacity to create a GoFundMe for a cause that we
Cool.
choose together as a server, raise as much money as we can for that cause, and then donate it on behalf of the server. We also have a member in the server named Blackfeathers, who's going to be on the podcast tomorrow at 9 p.m. Central to talk about preparation, doomsday prepping and stuff, which will be really cool. And as you know, I'm
Cool.
a prepper and you're a bit of a
Yeah.
prepper. But
Yeah.
he also forges or makes like swords and armor and stuff, right? As well. He does like blacksmith type stuff. I guess
Wow.
they're replicas. So what I'm going to do is have him make one or more Excalibur swords and offer those as rewards to people who make donations to the cause. And I think
Oh,
that'll allow
neat.
us to raise a lot of money. So I was wondering if you had a suggestion right now for a cause that you think is a great thing to support financially. And then we could use that as a possibility for our GoFundMe, and people who listen to this podcast and are impressed by it or by you or convinced by what you're saying might be encouraged to support that cause, and we'll just see how much we can raise. So why don't we just say you choose any cause you want? I will make a GoFundMe page, or I'll ask, Dawson to do it, please. And then we'll donate whatever amount is raised after this podcast has been up for a while. And we'll include the link to the GoFundMe in the podcast. And that way, maybe we can turn the podcast into something that helps other people. How's that sound?
That's really cool. Yeah, that sounds great.
So, can you suggest a charity that you would endorse as one that would be worth everyone in the community getting behind and the roundtable supporting?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a personal thing, but I think something that most people can at least relate to and feel something about would be the environment. I think that touches everyone's life quite broadly, you know. So something about, yeah, I can't think of anything that's not specific to Manitoba right now, unfortunately. And I am aware that a lot of your members are not, well, not even Canadian actually. So maybe something that's a bit broader than that. But yeah, I
Well, I
can.
can mention what I had in mind. So, as you know, the environment is my biggest passion in terms of that. And I
Mhm.
wrote my master's thesis on the global ecological crisis. That was
Which you
my greatest.
dedicated to me and Semper Sequoia or something.
Yes, my dedication of my master's thesis was to my beloved wife, Andi Sharma, without whose love and support none of this would have been possible, and to Sequoia sempervirens hyperion and all its relations. And Sequoia
Yeah.
sempervirens hyperion is the largest redwood, it's the largest tree on Earth. Its location is above top secret. And so I dedicated my thesis to my wife and to trees. So that shows you my emotional priorities. Now, what I wanted to do then is to raise money and simply plant trees. I like trees. We could make more trees. Trees are good. They make air. They fight climate change, etc. People cut them down. People need to plant them. So, what do you think about just raising a couple $1,000s and just planting as many trees as we can, and then dedicate that as roundtable forest or Camelot forest?
Yeah, that's amazing. What a brilliant idea. Love it.
Okay. Well, if you think that's a good way to go, maybe we can talk later and you can help me identify who would be the best, charity to go with or whatever. But I just wanted to put that forward in this podcast so that those who are listening know that that's coming in the future. And I do hope you guys will all support it because I think it'd be another way that this server could, be a positive social movement as it already is, and move to actually supporting charities and showing that a Discord server can be a place that is a basis for really positive things, as I think we've shown again and again. We also have an addictions and support meeting on the server. I don't know if you'd ever be willing to attend that, either just to talk or share your story, but it might be
Wow,
good
yeah,
for the
I
people
love that.
listening. Great. So, one thing I thought we should talk about, this is, among other things, a conspiracy theory server, and you and I did share a extraordinary experience. I think you know the one I'm talking about. So, do you want to just give your story of how you remember it? Because they've probably heard mine. Um,
Sure.
I think that'll be
And
interesting.
like,
So, this is a UFO story.
yeah, I um I will preface this by saying that I have the memory of a goldfish. But so the way I remember it is that we were gonna go pick up my sister. She was working. So we left our house and we drove down the street, just to the end of the street. So we were like three houses back from the end of the street. So it wasn't a far drive. And I don't Yeah, so we pulled up to the stop sign, about to turn right to go get my sister, and just directly in front of us, just above the houses, the rooftops of the houses across the street, there were these weird glowing lights. Now, I remember that you and me, I think we remember this a little bit differently. I remember it was three, maybe three like balls, like glowing spheres of light in the sky, and they were just kind of hanging there. They weren't doing anything, and they weren't like, it wasn't like a, what am I trying to say? It was like a bunch of energy in like a spherish shape. So it wasn't like a coherent or solid ball object, right? It was like light and energy, and it was kind of anyway. So there was like three or four of them, and they were just hanging there in the sky, and this like orange color. And then we sat there. We were even late for picking up my sister. We sat there and we were just like, what the fuck is that? But eventually we did drive off, and to get my sister. We picked her up, we brought her back home. And if I remember correctly, we then went back after we dropped her off. We drove back to the top of the end of the street just to be like, just to see if they were still there or anything. And then it was at that point that yeah, that they, to me anyway, they seem to coalesce into like this three pointed. There were the 3 points of light, and it like made this triangle, but it was definitely had coalesced or solidified into more of a cohesive object, which then, as soon as we saw it, it genuinely it seemed to like know that we saw it, which is a crazy thing because how would I even how would points of light be able to characterize to me that they know that I'm there? But if you can consider a scenario where these points of light, all of a sudden you can tell that they know that you're looking at them. And then they were like, they took off in that instance. So they like oriented around knowing that we were there, and then they fucking took off. And then what did we do? We we gunned it. We were in this residential area, and there was like a straightaway and down like anyway, it was like a straight road. And so we like took off chasing this light thing that was like now like flying, skimming, whatever, just above the rooftops to the right of us as we were going along. And then you climbed out the window because we have video of this. We had a cell phone, and you climbed out the window and you're hanging onto the car as I'm going like 100 kilometers in this like 30-kilometer zone. And you're like trying to get video, and we're trying to chase that. I don't know what we thought we were doing. What were we gonna do? I don't even know. But eventually it reached a point where the road just didn't go that way, so we couldn't follow them anymore. And yeah, that was the craziest thing I ever saw, man.
That was a great telling of the story. I remember it exactly the same. And my sensation that it knew that we saw it was exactly the same. It was a very strong sensation. It was hovering there doing something of its own. And then we pulled up to the end of the street and we're like, holy shit, look, another one or whatever. And it was like, whoa. And it went like zip, and we chased it. And I was sitting in the window filming it. And we got it for a while, but it didn't show up great in the photos. We did get some of it on, like there was a visible light in the video, but we couldn't see all the orbs. I can't remember if it was 3 or 4, but yeah, they were big orange balls. And
Yeah.
the second one, like you, I thought it was like a solid triangle, whereas
Yeah.
the other ones were 3 orange balls of energy. And
Yeah.
my take on it was the first 3 orange balls of energy were some kind of paranormal or UFO phenomenon, like ET phenomenon. And then the second thing was some kind of human thing that had been dispatched to
Yeah.
investigate it, right?
Yeah.
So imagine that you have a situation where alien UFOs or spiritual orbs or whatever appear sometimes, and then you have a high-tech human agency whose job is to intervene and study those things. So they say, oh, we have a sighting of a UFO. They dispatch a drone, like a high-speed video drone, to like take
Yeah.
sensors or scan it. So what we saw was the appearance of these orange orbs. And then when we came back, we saw whatever was human controlled studying that area or whatever. And then when it saw us, which it would, right? Because it would be like, oh, look, people, it could see us down there,
Yeah.
see us looking
Yeah.
at it. So it just flew away. But it was slow enough that we could chase it in our car, which means
Yeah.
it wasn't like moving, supernaturally fast. That's
But it
another
was
thing.
moving pretty fast though, because I remember I had to floor it. Also, it made absolutely no sound. There was no sound. There was no rotors. There was no
No,
air being displaced, as you would expect with a drone that has,
I
rotors.
agree.
So it
I'm
was
still
completely
here.
silent. And then, and the other thing to note about that was interesting that I remember very clearly is that the original spheres of light that we saw were a particular kind of orange, but then this other triangle thing, to me the lights were a different color, and I think you might remember that differently, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I remember the second one as being kind of greenish white or whitish green,
White,
and the first
yeah.
ones being orange. The first ones
Orange,
were
yeah.
large, the second one was small. The
Yeah.
first one were balls, the second one was triangular. The first
Triangle,
ones
yeah.
were floating. One of them was floating. That's what I remember. 3 of them or 2 of them, I think 3 of them were staying still and not moving, and one of them was going slowly this
Yeah.
way. And the reason we stopped watching them, because we watched them as long as they were there, is 3 of them disappeared
Started
and
to
one of them
fade.
remained longer
Yeah.
for another minute
Yeah.
and stayed. And
Yeah.
then it disappeared and we're like,
Yeah.
what? And the thing
Yeah.
about this story is, right, we were married for 10 years, like 12 years basically. And in my 33 years of life, not only have I never seen anything like that, I mean, when we saw it, I mean, I remember her, right? She just went crazy. She said, oh my God, it's a UFO. Like, holy shit, we're seeing UFOs. So it wasn't like, what is that? Could that be like a plane? And we were like, that is not normal. That is not something you would ever see. And her reaction was just like blown away. And me too. I was like, wow, we're seeing something. And I just said, it cannot be a helicopter. It cannot be a plane. It cannot be a star. It cannot be a planet. It cannot be the moon. It cannot be an asteroid. It cannot be any known thing. It's a legitimate UFO sighting. And, maybe, who knows? But they were of the orb type, and technically it was two. And I would argue that we have another completely separate UFO sighting together, which I'm wondering if you remember as well. And that one, we were in the backyard. I don't know if you remember, and we saw
The
a
black
plane
spot?
flying. Sorry?
The
Well,
black
tell me
spot?
what you remember, whatever you remember.
No, because I don't remember really. I remember
Well,
standing in the backyard, but yeah, it was like this spot that you can't look at to see, but you anyway, you
Well,
tell it.
so what it was, though, was the way I remember it, and I remember it fairly well, is what it looked like was we saw one plane approaching us. You could see a plane. We'd often see planes flying over our backyard, like often.
Yeah.
And so it was one plane flying over our backyard in the distance, but there was a second plane behind it. And the reason it was notable was because it was so close to the other plane. Like there was these two planes or two lights in the sky moving towards us very close. And I said, why are those planes so close together? You wouldn't normally see like one plane here and one plane right behind it. And they came all the way into view, but then when they got kind of over us, the plane continued on and this thing stopped and it stayed in the sky.
Yeah.
And not only that, it stopped and made no noise and let the other plane get away. So it looked like a plane the whole way. And there was a plane. Then the plane moved on and the light stayed. But the other strange thing is you couldn't look directly at it. If you looked directly at it, you couldn't see it.
Yeah,
But if you
that's
looked
what
a
I
bit to the
remember.
side, you could clearly
You could
see
see
it. And I
it,
was like,
yeah.
does it have
Which,
some ability to block your eyes?
incidentally, I think I have an explanation for that now, having gone through my pilot's license. It's one of the things they teach you when you're getting your night flying rating, is that at night when you want to see something better, you actually look like 2 inches to the right of it. And
Right.
because of the way that the night is and our rods and our cones work, you can
Yeah.
actually perceive the thing better. So anyway,
Well, that
just explains.
perfectly explains the visual effect of why we couldn't see it when we looked directly at it, but it still
Yeah,
doesn't explain what it was because, again, it looked like a plane and it was quite clearly visible. Even when it stopped
yeah,
and was like cloaked in the way it was, we could still clearly see it. It was not an illusion, it was a physical thing of some kind.
yeah,
And it was moving with the plane and then stopped, which means it wasn't a plane because obviously a plane can't stop and hover in place. And it
yeah.
wasn't a helicopter because you would hear a helicopter and it was too high. And so it was a UFO because we don't know what it was, right? And it was silent and it was hovering, and that was what makes it unusual because helicopters and planes are neither silent nor hovering.
I
Well,
completely
helicopters.
forgot about that one, to be honest. I
Yeah, so
completely
I would
forgot
say we
about
have
that.
two legitimate
Yeah,
UFO sightings.
yeah.
Now, we had some ghost experiences, but I'm pretty sure you were asleep during both of them, which is ironic because you were the one who was always so terrified of ghosts. But when you fell asleep, ghost shit would happen, and I wouldn't wake you up because I knew you'd be so scared. But you don't have any memory of the time of all the poltergeists at the cabin, Church's Point, the one that was like on
Yeah.
three sides water. Were you awake at all when all the banging was happening after we watched Paranormal Activity? Do you
Uh,
have any memory of that?
I do. I remember the banging, but what I remember most about that is the insane night terrors that I would get in that one room. I wouldn't get them anywhere else. I'd never had them before in my life, and I have never had them since. But in that one room, and not even in the other rooms in that cabin, but in that one room of that cabin, I would have the most insane experiences at night, like where I would wake up screaming at the top of my lungs, scrambling for like to get out of the room. One time I think I was scrambling at the window. Anyway, it was just the most ridiculous. So anyway, all of
Well,
that
yeah,
to say,
and
yeah.
I wanted to bring that up. So that cabin was certainly haunted in some sense. It was had either a dead spirit of a human or a demon or something was there, because we lived there for I don't know how many years, and me and Andy spent whole summers out there and actually lived there for prolonged periods of time. And I
Yeah.
loved it out there. I never felt
Yeah.
scared at all. I was never afraid of it. I loved it. It was my
Well,
favorite cabin we've had.
same.
But
Yeah.
looking back, it was definitely haunted. And the one way to know for sure is that, yeah, you had these outrageous night terrors every time we slept there. And it never
Mhm.
happened at home. And at home, our room was completely pitch black,
Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
pitch black dark. So it wasn't about darkness because that was the
Mhm.
darkest room of all. And
Yeah.
never happened to you anywhere else. And we've been all over the world in all different kinds of places,
Yeah.
only and always there. Why would that be the case?
In
And
that
then
one
not only
room.
that, it wasn't just the one room, it was on either room on either side of that hall. It happened
The
a lot
green
more.
and the yellow room?
It happened a lot more on, it might have only been the yellow room, actually. It
I
might
think
have
it
only
was
been the
only the
yellow room, which
yellow
is even
room.
weirder, right?
I
And why
think
did
it
we
was
keep
the only
sleeping in
one.
that room if you kept having night terrors? Why didn't we think of changing the room? That is so dumb. We like stayed in that haunted room the whole time. We could have just changed rooms. But it wasn't just that room though. The whole cabin was completely haunted, and so
Mm.
the first way I know is you kept having those night terrors. And again, you wouldn't try and get out of the room. You would grab me in the middle of the night,
Oh
like
yeah.
frantically grab me. And you know me,
Yeah.
I have like a crazy startle reflex, like ninja style. If someone grabs me in my sleep, so you would be like, Shogun, 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 and you'd like grab me super tight and be panicking, and I'd have to try and calm you down and turn the light on without
Yeah.
getting startled myself, and that would happen
Yeah.
every time. And I'll just share my other story, which again, I think you were there but asleep, and I didn't wake you up and tell you because I knew how much it would scare you. But
Was this
basically,
okay, so no, go ahead.
well,
I don't
I
want to
think I might
interrupt.
be mixing up two stories. The one I didn't wake you up was the poltergeist one where it was banging, and
Mm.
so anyways, there's the night terrors, right? The second story I'll just tell quickly. I was out there by myself, and I'm not scared of ghosts, right? You've always been scared of ghosts. I've never been scared of ghosts. And I'm not scared of being alone. I'm not afraid of the dark or anything like that, right? But
Yeah.
all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I got a chill up and down the back of my neck, and literally the hairs in the back of my neck stood up, and I got a clear thought, like bright in my mind, and it went ghosts. It was just literally a thing up my neck, and I just said ghosts, and I was like, what? And I'm like, all of a sudden, I felt uncomfortable. And anyways, I went to bed, and I was feeling uncomfortable already.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I had an uncanny feeling. I get into bed and turn off the lights and put the covers over me. And the second I get into bed, like it was perfectly timed to be right when I got into bed exactly, there's a loud crash outside in the cabin. A loud crash. And the cabin is locked. You know me, I always meticulously lock doors and windows. Everything was locked. There's nothing in the cabin. There's no airflow. There's no movement. It's on pure Canadian Shield granite. So I was like, how did something make a loud crash in the middle of the cabin in the middle of the night when nothing is moving, right? How is it possible? And I got scared, and I don't get scared often, almost never actually lately. And yet I literally wanted to like pull the blankets over myself and like hide in the bed like a child. And I was like, you're a grown man. You got to go see what the fuck that was. So I get up and I go out, and it's a picture of me as a child, and it's fallen off the wall. It's a picture of me as a baby. It's fallen off the wall and broken, and it's me smiling as a kid. And all around the outside, it says like faith, love, dreams, hope. So the
Yeah, I
message I'm
remember it.
getting from it is we knocked this particular picture off the wall right when you got in bed, after you had this premonition of ghosts. And we chose this picture because it's the scariest and most sinister picture we could have broken. It's like your faith, your life, your
Yeah.
dreams is what we broke, not any of the other family. And again, that picture had been hanging there for months and months. There was no reason it would have fallen all of a sudden right then. So I go to bed after that, after being weirded out. I go to sleep. In the middle of the night, I wake up. There's a bright light shining directly in my eyes, right? Light right in my eyes. And I'm like paralyzed, right? And I realize I can't move for a minute because I'm so confused by this bright light. It's like, imagine right in your eyes. And it's a flashlight, and it's in my room. Again, everything's locked. The whole cabin is completely locked. The flashlight is sitting across the room on my dresser. It's pointed directly at my eyes, perfectly lined up, and it's shining into my eyes from across the room. And obviously that wasn't that way when I went to sleep. A, I doubt it was pointed directly at my eyes, and B, it obviously wasn't on because I never would have fallen asleep with a flashlight in my eyes. Plus, I didn't use a flashlight. So something in the middle of the night, I'm quite sure if you had a camera, you would have seen the flashlight rotate on the fucking thing on its own. And also, in order to turn that flashlight on, you hold it firmly with one hand and you twist the other thing like a pickle jar, like opening a pickle jar, and it turns on. So something in the cabin had the power to knock that painting off and do that and turn it on. So that to me was proof of a ghost. And then the other thing, which I'll just say, sorry for going long on the mic, was do you remember when we watched Paranormal Activity at the cabin?
Yeah.
So after that, I remember all night long loud bangs and knocks in the cabin, just like in the movie. Do you have any memory of that?
Yeah, I do. Yes, and it was like some metallic bangs too, and like metallic sounding, and the thing about that was, we'd been spent 6, 7 years going to this cabin, never once heard those sounds, and then all of a sudden this night we hear these sounds.
When we watched Paranormal Activity. And
Yeah.
Paranormal Activity is about a poltergeist who terrorizes a young couple in their home by making loud bangs and knocks in their house. I watched
Yeah.
that movie. I don't normally get scared, but I got a creeped out feeling watching that movie. Looking back, I don't think the movie was that scary. I think I was getting that feeling because there were ghosts in that cabin. And when we were watching a movie about ghosts and poltergeists, that created like a link to those beings and empowered them for that night because we were already creeped out and we were already scared from watching the movie. So that night, all night, I'm listening to these bangs and knocks, and I'm sitting there, and I'm, despite my craziness, I'm actually quite rational, where I look for actual tactically possible outcomes or causes of effects. And I was like, what could make noises like this? I'm like, not raccoons, not bears, not people, not wind, not mice, not rats. And I'm like, I'm not on drugs. I'm not drunk. I'm not asleep. I checked to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I'm like, I'm wide awake, and this whole cabin is rattling and rocking and knocking, and this is paranormal. So that cabin was haunted as fuck. And then later we found a marine combat knife in the wall. And it was a big marine combat knife that I later gave to Trigger, who was on the podcast yesterday, Duros, Trigger, my best friend.
Yeah.
And so why was there a marine combat knife buried in the wall? Because that would be a valuable relic and historical thing, probably saw action in World War I or II, World War II. And so my theory is that was a murder weapon that was concealed in the wall.
Maybe I didn't know you gave that to Trigger.
Yeah, I gave it to him as a wedding gift. And he was on last night for his third time.
That's cool.
Yeah. So anyways, I just wanted to reminisce about our UFO and poltergeist stories, since those are, roundtable appropriate topics. We've talked about your work with the government briefly. We've talked about your flying. Oh yeah, can you tell us about the experience of flying food to those northern communities? Just so tell us what the project was. And this is what I want to say before. So not only did you get in a job where you would be able to work in a way that would help the communities that you cared about, you also taught yourself to fly planes in order that you could take food and fly it to them in order to deal with the fact that there wasn't enough fresh food there. So this is pretty awesome. Just so much comes together for you to actualize this benevolent vision. But I was wondering, what was the actual experience of it like? Because you would just be flying this small plane through the open sky across this huge open country. I would be scared, right? Because I'd feel like I'd get lost. But obviously, you know how to orient yourself. There's instruments. And in particular, I was wondering, what is the landing like? And also, is there any part that is frightening, or is it completely not frightening at all to you? Like scary?
Those are great questions. So, yeah, I'll start with the first part. So, what was it like flying to this northern remote community? It was really cool, and you're right. It was winter time. It was I wanted to deliver the 350 pounds of food before the first one, I should say. The first one, I wanted to deliver the 350 pounds of food before Christmas, but because of weather, we had to delay. So it didn't quite work out for Christmas, but I did manage to get the food there before New Year's Eve. So they were able to still have a community feast at a day, one of the high holidays. So that was nice. So to get to this community, um, I flew right over Lake Winnipeg, which is this massive lake. It's actually just a bit of trivia, fun fact, not really fun. It's the most largest polluted freshwater lake in the world, which is kind of gross and horrible, but hey, that's, that title we have. So anyway, in the wintertime, it is just this vastness of frozen snow and ice, and everything looks the same, and the horizon blends into the ground. So, on a foggy, snowy winter day, you really can't tell which way is up. And that was the kind of day that I had for flying that day. But it was still fine. I still had my minimums. I could, because you have to have a certain amount of visibility and to be able to take off and to land. So I had those mins, and it was actually a pretty smooth flight. Thankfully, not a lot went wrong. Actually, nothing went wrong. On the other end, the landing was great. It was a soft field in the winter, so you get soft field landings is when you don't have an asphalt, tarmac runway like you do at your Winnipeg Internationals and that kind of thing. It's just oftentimes it's a field. A lot of times it's a gravel strip, so that's what I was flying into. And of course, in Canadian winters, you're dealing possibly with 6 feet of snow on top of that. So that was all very new for me, but the runway was cleared. They were expecting me that day, so somebody had come out and cleared the soft field runway, and it was a long strip, which was great because a lot of these northern communities have very short strips. Even for the little four-seater that I'm flying, I don't need a ton of runway, but I need some runway, especially because I'm inexperienced. at that point. And but they had this particular community had a long strip, which was great. And so, yeah, the landing was fine. It came in. In fact, I think there's a video online somewhere of the actual landing video I took. So that was kind of cool. And it was great. On the way back, I flew, and actually, I probably shouldn't say this on video
Don't
in a
say anything you
recording.
shouldn't say. You can tell me later. It's okay. Don't say anything you shouldn't say. You don't want to
Okay.
do that.
Okay, that sounds good. It was
But
just a
that's
really
a
fun
great.
trip back.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's amazing. I wouldn't do it. I don't like heights. I always thought it was funny. Fight or flight is that old expression, and your thing was flying, and my thing was fighting. So I don't know. It's just one of those little things. So
Yeah.
Dawson, is Dawson still in the room, or Annabelle? Could you guys look through the podcast voice text channel and see if anyone's asked any questions that are appropriate and good questions? And if so, can you please prepare to read them out after you've identified a few? Kashika as well.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any now, but I'd like to use a moderator's progression and ask a few questions.
Okay, so maybe we should open it up for questions now. Does that seem like?
Yeah, so everyone listening, go into, oh, I'm in the wrong channel. Go
Yeah,
into
there's a channel called Podcast Text.
Text, and you can ask your questions there.
Yeah, so we'll continue talking for a few minutes, and while we're talking, I'll ask Dawson and Kashika to just filter the questions, look for good ones, and ask them out loud when we go to questions, and maybe I'll just talk for a few minutes to give people to consider if they want to ask anything and what they might ask. And everybody make sure you have your mic closed because somebody's got echo right now.
Or can I use my moderator's procession and ask a few questions?
Yeah, why don't we let Dawson go now? I'd love that. And you ask a few questions, not just one. Everyone else will get one question. She'll respond to it, and then we'll go to someone else. But since Dawson knows Andi and has talked to her before and has a lot of good questions, let's give him his own little interview here. So ask as many as you want, Dawson.
Yes, so I mean, I'll let other people speak, but I have two serious questions and one silly question. The first serious question is, where do you see US and Canadian politics in the next 10 to 15 years with the rise of right-wing populist parties, both with the turn of the Republican Party in the US closer to the right, and the rise of the People's Party in Canada with the former member of the House of Commons, Maxime Bernier. Where do you see those politics? Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? And the next serious question is, I get the sense that you are very involved in social justice issues. However, on the flip side, there is a recent rise in anti-Semitism, both on the far right and the far left. I was talking to one person who was a student at one of the universities in Ontario, and they wanted to bring in an Israeli speaker to talk about the dangers of conflict and about how Israel should seek peace with the Palestinians. And this historian was blocked from speaking because he was Israeli. And they wanted, the BDS movement said, no matter what Israeli comes, either anti-Israel or anti-Israeli government or pro-Israeli government, they didn't want any Israelis to speak there at all. So I'm wondering, how do you think we balance the issue of peace and dignity for the Palestinians, but also not go in the other direction of complete anti-Semitism? And the silly question is, what is one embarrassing story you can tell us about Shogun?
Okay. Okay, thank you for those questions. I will preface this by saying I'm not like at the trigger level of political savviness, but I do have some opinions, so I'm happy to share them. And thank you for asking the question. In terms of your first question around the future for Canadian American relations, given the rise of right wing populism, um, I don't know that I think I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic in the sense that things are going to change in Canada. I think that fortunately or unfortunately, Justin Trudeau has not inspired the Canadian people, and I don't think that he will get. He doesn't have another term secured, and so that opens the door. It leaves a vacuum, and we'll see what happens there. In Canada, I don't think we face as extreme, although it is there. The rise of the right wing populism, as you say. Unfortunately, I'm totally unfamiliar with the American context, other than what we see in our international news. So I can't speak specifically to that. But in terms of the future for Canadian American political relations on that end of the spectrum, I would say I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that, well, and it kind of ties into your second question. When we stifle the opportunity to have meaningful discourse around challenging topics, things like right-wing topics or things like Israeli-Palestine relationships, when we stifle our ability to have discourse around that, then we're in really big trouble. And so I think that I'm cautiously optimistic because I remain hopeful that we will be able to, as a rational people, still be able to engage in meaningful discourse around challenging topics. I do like to think that will continue to happen in a meaningful way. So that's all I really have to say about the first question. I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for that. The second question around Israeli-Palestine relations, Yes, I think the problem definitely is that you have to allow people the platform, as long as it's not hate speech, to speak their piece of whatever they're saying. So the BDS saying that whether they're pro or anti-Israel state, they don't deserve to speak. Well, that's absolutely not the right way to go about things. And unfortunately, we get that in that polarized, polemic kind of approach to things. But one of my favorite philosophers, Sam Harris, speaks so much more eloquently and beautifully about this than I could possibly ever. But basically, the idea is that we need to be able to talk about these things, and he said that mostly in the context of being able to talk about Islam in general and the problematic tenets that the religion holds, but in other things as well. So just generally speaking, we need to be able to talk about all of the hard things that we need to talk about in order to work them out. We need to hold space for that. So I think I don't agree with BDS in that. And okay, so full disclosure, one of the boards that I sit on, the Social Planning Council of Winnipeg, you can look it up. They do great work. We had a speaker come in. She's a Palestinian activist, and she came in to Winnipeg she's an American Palestinian activist, and she has a very controversial past. But we invited her to speak. It had nothing to do with the Israel-Palestine conflict. We invited her to speak as part of a panel of other activists who have found themselves on the wrong side of public court.
I pulled my pants down and mooned everybody. That was pretty embarrassing. I mean, it would have been if I had any, shame, but it was just silly. I mean, nobody really cared. It was late at night. Everybody was partying and being ridiculous.
That's so funny.
That's
that
one.
That's what
but you got to
remember.
think of one too, because he asked you.
I know, and I can't even embarrassing. When we were running around, when you were running around naked at the cabin or
When was it
golf
running around
course.
the cabin, or what story was that again? What was the context? I don't remember.
Oh, I don't know. Just generally, those nights at
Rory
the
got
cabin.
naked at the cabin. I don't think
Yeah,
I ever
Rory
did.
I can't think of super embarrassing. I'll have to think.
Well, we can come back to that one if you think of one by the end of the podcast. Thank you for answering those questions. Good questions. How about can Kashika or Dawson just choose the best questions that you think would be the most worthwhile?
Yeah, let me check.
And read them out loud, just one at a time. And we'll do as many as you have time for here, Andy. And I don't want to take much time.
Here are two good questions. What is your view? So I'll ask two. What is your view on Quebec as a province in Canada's ecosystem? Are they quite different to Shogun's? And number two, do you believe white supremacy is as widespread as the media claims?
Great questions. For the first one, what are Shogun's views on Quebec?
It's an inside joke. We're not going to get into it, but just tell us
Oh,
yours. I love
okay.
Quebec. I'll tell you my views on Quebec. I love Quebec. It's a great province. My favorite gym in MMA is TriStar, and that's where I trained and where I'm hopefully going. And I'll hopefully be going to Quebec to study the French language if I'm successful with the military application.
You
I love
hate the
Quebec.
French
It's one
language.
of our best provinces, and the Quebecois are wonderful and important parts of our country. And that's where I stand. But what is your take on Quebec issues?
Yeah, so I just feel like now that I'm closer to the region and I'm actually considering about buying a home on the Gatineau side, for a number of reasons, but it's stunning, first of all. Absolutely just the most beautiful. Gatineau Park is stunning. Google it. Amazing. But as for the politics, when you're in Quebec, you feel like you're in a different country. You leave Ontario, you go across the bridge, and it definitely feels like it feels more European. I don't know if that's just Montreal specifically, but yeah, you feel like you're in a different country, and I think that that's probably a result of how Quebecois feel about themselves. And you get the whole separatist movement, and I understand that completely. That I totally understand that. Other than that, though, I don't. I mean, they have subsidized childcare, so you can get childcare for $8 a day in Quebec, and I think that's amazing. That's very progressive. Yeah, you pay more taxes than the rest of the country, but for things like that, kind of worth it in my mind. I'm not, I don't have any problem with paying more taxes. Um, yeah, so and that's about the extent of my opinion right now, in terms of Quebec and Quebec's politics. I do have a lot of friends that have concerns with, the issue with wearing turbans and that kind of thing, but I'm not familiar with that, so I don't want to speak to that. Yeah.
Thank you. Great answer. Great question. Maybe Dawson or Kasheka again, just choosing the best questions, the most
Well,
relevant questions.
there was a second question there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If white if
Yeah, do you believe white supremacy is as big as an issue as the media makes it out to be?
Yeah, and that's a great question.
Or hold on, in full disclosure, do you believe white supremacy is as widespread as the media claims?
Right. I think I want to preface this by saying I have an inherent bias against the media in general. And so use that lens when you hear my response. Um, so I think that because we live in a world where news is sensationalized, and that's how they sell um, viewers on this kind of thing, we probably hear about it way more than is actually the case. However, I will say that systemic racism is alive and well in Canada. Um, and I don't know if it makes sense to separate systemic racism from the specific flavor of white supremacy. Maybe they have different connotations, maybe they don't. But and when I say that, I'm specifically talking about the legacy of colonialism and the systemic oppression that Indigenous people face in Canada, and that is inextricably linked to European settlers and colonizers. So I guess in that sense, definitely in that sense, it's white supremacy. But in terms of like neo white supremacy, is that even a thing? I'm not totally sure, but I can for sure say that systemic racism and the legacy of colonialism is definitely alive and well in Canada. Yeah,
Great
I
answer.
think we.
Thank you. Great question. Is there any other particularly good, relevant, appropriate questions? If not, I can probably think of a few more. No, I'll let you guys think about it and let me know if there are any more.
There's one
So,
that was
yeah,
talking about the ghosts that you had.
yeah, there's two more. One is how did you get rid of the ghosts? Did you perform an exorcism, or did they appear, or did they disappear themselves? And another question, what is your ethnicity? Because I think you've mentioned before sort of your path from to Canada. So I think that would be people would be interested in that.
Why don't we start with the second question, if that's all right?
Sure. Yeah, so I was born and raised in Barbados. It's a tiny little island. Actually, I don't know if you folks are aware, but there's a volcano erupting in St. Vincent right now in the Caribbean, and Barbados is in that chain of islands and is getting a lot of the volcanic ash in the sky right now. Side note, a little bit of trivia there. But yeah, so I'm from Barbados, and my ethnicity. So the term is West Indian, and basically what that means is that my heritage is Indian. So my father's family is from the north of India in Kashmir. My mother's family is from the central India in Faizabad, Hyderabad. But my family was part of the diaspora. So they were brought as indentured slaves to the Caribbean to work plantations and different scenarios like that. But obviously, the difference between slavery and indentured slaves is that there was a period of time where you would work, and then at the end of that time, you would get land. That whole thing. I don't need to go into that, but yeah. So I was raised as a Hindu. I'm atheist. Obviously now, well, not obviously. I guess you wouldn't know that, but now, and yeah, I think that pretty much explains it. Yeah.
Great answer. So I'll answer the second question, or the first question, which is about the ghosts. So we never got rid of the ghosts. We changed the cabin. So my father unfortunately decided to sell that cabin. Andy and I were planning to take over that mortgage on that and actually own that, but unfortunately he decided to sell it, and then we moved. My family has had a series of cabins in Manitoba in the White Shell, and so we've lived a number of cabins all in the same lake, right? So someone else has those ghosts now. But I did do an exorcism there when I arrived, just obviously not very well. But my mother adds a part to the story that I forgot about, which is that when we first went there to buy the cabin, we first went to check it out. I literally said, if we move here, we have to do an exorcism. And that was the first thing I said the first time I ever was there, because I guess I do have that kind of spiritual insight or whatever. So I knew there was some kind of haunting there. I forgot that story, but my mom reminded me that the first time we went there, I said, we're going to have to do an exorcism. And maybe we didn't do it, actually. I guess we didn't, but I said we should. And only later did we learn that indeed the place was haunted. And there was
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I forgot about it too, but my mom reminded me of that when I told her about some of the other things that happened. She's like, yeah, you said that the first time we were there.
Wow.
And there was also like bullet casings and empty bottles of vodka and knives and like just weird things everywhere. It was really unkempt. It was kind of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like, it's beautiful property. But so anyways, we won't get into the ghost thing again. But we didn't get rid of them. We just changed cabins. And the current cabin, fortunately, does not appear to be haunted whatsoever. So is there any other questions?
Can I pose a question?
Of course, sir.
All right. Kisharma, when you're flying an aeroplane, does it change your emotional body to a certain extent? And if so, to what extent?
Great question. Now, if I can ask a clarifying question before I respond, when you say emotional body, maybe you can explain to me what you mean by that, and then I can respond to tell you if there's a change. I think the answer is yes, but I just want to make sure.
Right. So, well, your emotional body, you might go outside and see the sun, and by the sight of the sun, you arrive at a certain feeling. That feeling might be positive for most people. So, in that regard, that's what I mean by the emotional body.
Thank you for clarifying. And yes, I would say absolutely. There is no other feel. I have never experienced the way that my emotional body is while I'm flying in any other thing in my life. And I've went skydiving. I've climbed. Shogun and I have rappelled down 200-meter cliffs. All these things. But flying is an entirely different experience, and I think emotional body is a perfect. I didn't have that terminology before, but now that I do, I think it's a perfect way to describe the feeling, because it is something altogether outside of your intellectual self, I guess. Because yeah, I'm going through the motions and I'm, adjusting the mixture and the pitch and the power as I'm flying and all that stuff. But there's this like other part of me that is, you can't help but be tripped out that you're flying a fucking plane, and you're in the middle, 5,000 feet up in the air, and it's just a trip. So that is also always present, and I didn't have a word for it before, but now I know it is my emotional body, and then like a reaction of my emotional body to being in the air and flying myself somewhere. Yeah, totally. Because it's not the same. I don't feel the same when I'm on a 737 flying to a destination. I don't get that same feeling. Still, it's really cool and amazing that I'm in this 737, but it's a totally different experience when you're flying a little four-seater yourself.
Oh, so by 737, you mean a very big aircraft, and an aeroplane is like a four-seated small plane? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I
All
can't
right.
think of
All right.
an analogy, but yeah.
Can I ask a
Thank,
question to a
thank
pilot
you.
I've always wanted to know?
Sure.
I
Is
just
there
want
a
to
certain...
reiterate something, though. The way this is supposed to be working is that everyone in the room should be muted below the rank of Knight of the Round Table, and only Dawson or Kasheka should be reading questions unless they're coming from someone of that rank. So no one else is supposed to be able to speak unless they've been opened for a specific question.
If you have
So
your
I wasn't sure who that was speaking. I didn't recognize the voice. If you can tell me, I can let you know if they can ask it or not.
that
Is
was
there any more questions, Dawson or Kasheka?
Yeah, there are a couple of fun ones. One, for example, is do you believe Justin Trudeau is the son of Fidel Castro?
No, but I like the memes. Also, I don't know who was just asking that question, but you have a beautiful radio voice.
Who was that?
Kasheka, me.
No,
Thank you.
you're talking to Kashika. Yeah, Kashika is actually the new interviewer. So I've been asking her and helping her to take on more and more of the interviews because she got a great voice. She's a
Yeah.
wonderful person. Everybody loves her. She's a great interviewer. And actually, what I'd love to do in the future is another interview where Kashika interviews you. I think that would be great. I
Cool.
think that would be a wonderful interview. But sorry, go ahead.
That would be great. Thank you, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're welcome.
Was there another question?
There are several, but all
Just,
right. Here's one.
ask
In
any
your
that are
opinion,
good, delete any that are inappropriate, and ignore any that are bad.
yeah, as a political analyst, is there any way there will be peace in the Middle East after thousands of years of fighting?
Wow, that's a big question. And I feel like I should start by saying I'm not a political analyst. I'm a policy analyst, and my area of expertise is northern food security. So don't expect any like amazing answers from me in these sort of political arenas. But to answer your question, I feel just like a general no. I don't really see how it could be after all of these thousands of years of unrest. How are we going to find peace? That's very pessimistic of me. I also think that really we will only, as a people, as a humanity, will only unite in a meaningful way once we have a common external threat, like aliens or something.
Thank you.
Well said.
I actually have one. You mentioned being an atheist. How did you go from what was the process of losing your religion, and when did you finally feel confident enough to come out as an atheist?
Really good question. I never believed I was never a believer from a very young age. My father was a devout Hindu priest. My mom's an Anglican, although she was raised as a Muslim. that's a different story. But yeah, so I never believed and I never understood it when my dad was trying to, share his religion, share Hinduism with me. It just felt like stories, and I never really believed. So it was a very natural thing for me to eventually, when I could articulate these things in a meaningful way, just tell my parents, and they're cool because even though my dad was a devout Hindu priest, um, uh, they were very, very, very open-minded, and so didn't mind at all that I was an atheist. I didn't believe, and it really didn't feature very much at all once I came out. And also, I guess I should say that my dad passed away when I was um, young, so I guess it didn't really matter in the long run. But yeah, so that was never an issue for my family, thankfully, because they were so very open about just experiencing all kinds of religions and then making a decision for ourselves. So it was totally fine. It was interesting being married to a Christian for a long time, though, because, and I think the reason that it worked for so long was because Shogun's particular brand of religion at the time, I understand that's changed now, was just very open, and he was exploring everything. Like, I would honestly characterize him more of a Buddhist than a Christian at the time that we met, but always elements of Christianity. That was a strong foundation for him. Um, but because he was so open to all of the different kinds of religion, the fact that I was an atheist, it didn't really matter because we were able to have really cool conversations about that, and he wasn't dogmatic about it, so we were able to have conversations about
Mhm.
that.
And I wanted to say that, as you can see, Andi is extremely intelligent, extremely well spoken. And as you guys know, I love talking. So before I had the round table to talk to all the time, I had her, and we talked about all kinds of stuff. And of course, all the time, often from morning till night, right? And especially early on. And the number of times that I tried to explain to you why I believe in God, right, and the number of times that you tried to explain to me why you don't, it convinced me that there is no way to convince someone one way or the other. That's because we
Yeah,
explored every possible rhetorical exchange in
yeah,
completely good faith, and neither of us came any closer to the other one's perspective. So my
yeah,
conclusion from my relationship with her, knowing that she's very intelligent, I'm intelligent, we both think about it clearly and extensively, is that both answers, there is or isn't a God, are logically coherent, they're non falsifiable, they explain the observed phenomenon in question adequately, and therefore it becomes sort of which makes more sense to you, but you can't disprove either of them or prove either of them. So, but it also doesn't matter. And I just like to say, I know this is your interview, but it's a great example of how two people who have completely opposite opinions on theology can have completely congruent opinions on social issues, environmental issues, ethical issues, moral issues, what's right, what's wrong. And that's essentially what matters, right? So obviously, anyone who's working towards the good of the world should be an ally of anyone else who's working towards the good of the world, regardless of what they believe about God. And I think that's a good example as well that you can
yeah.
have a successful relationship where faith is not a shared element.
Yeah,
But
you totally can, although it does help. I think one of the things in the end was that the sacred institution of marriage, I guess, for an atheist isn't really that sacred.
yes, and that's why when I do remarry, I do insist that I will, marry a Christian, someone who shares my faith, because that was a learning experience for me. Because of course, to Christians, divorce is like one of the most unwantable things. So that was a cultural and moral difference based on religion, and it's totally understandable. But in the future,
Yeah.
I'd certainly like to have a shared faith relationship. And I'm sure.
Yep, that makes sense.
Hmm. That being said, sorry. Go
Let me
ahead, Beth.
ask you another question. This is somewhat personal, but I think it'd be good to hear that you and Shogun are obviously still friends. What are 2 to 3 things that you think of people who are in a similar situation to you or may find themselves in a similar situation? What are 2 to 3 things that have truly helped you all out and stay friends?
So I think the question was, what are ways that we were able to stay friends, and how could someone else going through a divorce or a breakup stay friends with their partner who they broke up with? Did she disconnect? Dawson, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. So, Andy, if you can hear us, if you could leave and rejoin the room, or if someone maybe wants to disconnect her so she can reconnect. If not, as she seems to be frozen. Hopefully she can rejoin us in a minute here. Thank you guys for your questions. Great questions. Keep them coming. She'll let us know when she's out of time. I think we might as well go as long as we can because it's pretty interesting, I think. So.
I've disconnected her. Hopefully she'll rejoin soon.
Yeah, if someone can also just message her to rejoin, I'm sure she'll know too, but you know. And if you guys could keep an eye on the recording bot, make sure it always says recording, it doesn't drop out, so that we know we get the full recording. And Dawson, I'll send the recording to you for upload. I think I can go ahead and send you the link right now.
Yeah, fingers crossed, but the recording's been pretty good so far.
It appears to be working perfectly well. She may have had a disconnection. If she isn't able to return, that's unfortunate. I'm sure she will be. But thank you again for attending. Thank you for your questions, and thank you for listening. I hope you will help spread the truth that you've heard here today. To any time you hear these people saying lies that I beat my wife or abused her, you've all heard the truth. These are horrible slanders. They're against the law. It's criminal. It's called slander. It's called libel. It's a vicious, malicious, dishonorable campaign of character assassination that I've been dealing with for these kind of people for years, ever since I made the server, even before. And it's just people who hate me and they're jealous of me and the server, and they just run around spreading horrible lies. And you've all heard for yourself that those are horrible lies. There's no evidence for it. They never had any reason to think those things were true. And so obviously they're completely discredited. They're dishonorable, evil people, liars of the worst order, who didn't just lie about me, but about her, right? Because she's, as you can see, a strong, independent woman, and by no wise would she put up with 10 years of abuse from me or anybody else. So when you say a lie like that about her, you're insulting her, saying she was that kind of person, and she's not. And say that she got STDs from me, well, that means they were saying she got STDs. She's never had an STD either, right? So all of these are criminal slanders that are legally actionable, and I hope people will learn from this example of the serious consequences of resorting to these kind of dishonorable tactics of slander and libel. And everybody needs to be muted when they're in the room. There's echoing. Everybody needs to be muted by the mods, Kasheka, Dawson.
Well,
So I'm just talking, hoping she can rejoin. I hope someone has DM'd her and pinged her in the chat, asking her to rejoin the chat. I'll send her a text message and see if she's able to come back or not.
I've pinged her to rejoin. There's also one last question, and it was pretty much in line with what was being discussed prior to her disconnection. I'll read it out. You can decide whether or not you want me to ask that question when the two of you are there. But it was, what was the catalyst for your breakup?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you're unsure about a question, don't ask it. Just send it in DM and allow me to decide if I want to answer it or not. I was hoping to answer that, but we'll have to see if she comes back. Otherwise, I'll just be able to give you my take on it. She already gave you one, which was the religious difference and how that played a role. Again, I don't know why she's disconnected now, but hopefully she can come back and ask that question. Otherwise, answer it. Otherwise, I'll just have to give you my answer. I just texted her to see. I'll give you my answer. And then we'll see about her. Again, there's echoing. There should be no echoing because there should be no open mics. So my answer would be that I think our trajectory was she, being an intelligent, ambitious, and desirable woman, was looking for an intelligent, ambitious, and desirable man. She was looking for a power couple, and that's how people described us, because I have a pretty impressive list of accomplishments as well, which was not the point of this podcast, right? But, you know, in academics and athletics and other ways, you know, I was a promising candidate. And I think we arced together for 12 years. We projected together in an upward motion. We both got government jobs. We both got master's degrees. I got a bunch of scholarships, publications. She got a bunch of awards. I got a bunch of awards. And now, at a certain point in my life, I became very focused on mixed martial arts. That was sort of what I was obsessively doing, jiu-jitsu and so forth, and MMA. And I think, yeah, so I'm just going to finish by saying I'm going to let her answer before I give my answer. And then, Andy, the question was, and thank you for rejoining. Can you hear me and can I hear you?
Yeah, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah. Okay. So the question that was asked is, what would you say is the catalyst for your breakup? And I think we should, maybe both answer it, or I could just let you answer it and only give a different answer if it's different, or whatever you prefer. Would you like to give your answer first?
No, please go ahead. Yeah, and then I could answer.
I mean, it's an interview of you, so I think it's better for you to give the answer that you would give to that question, because it's really your interview, not mine.
I think that can lead into what are some ways that other people in similar situations can stay friends?
Okay, right. So the first, let's answer them in the order they were asked. So the first question that was asked before you were disconnected was, and these might be close to the last two questions because I don't want to take too much of your time, but we'll see. But anyways, the first question was, it's given that we've managed to stay friends after our divorce, which is fairly uncommon, what advice could you give to other people who are going through divorce or breakups? Did she disconnect again? That's a shame.
No, I'm still here.
Oh, I lost your video for some reason. I can't see you. But anyways, yeah, what are some tips for how you could successfully stay friends with someone you're breaking up with, whether a wife or a girlfriend or boyfriend?
I mean, that is it's case by case. I think it's pretty rare in general to stay friends once you break up. Never mind once you divorce. But the relationship that we had was just I think we were just best friends first. Maybe, and that's why we were able to stay. I think ultimately, for me, what happened at the end of the relationship was that we just grew up into different, like Shogun mentioned, we met when we were 19. He was 18 and I was 19, 20. And we grew up together. And those are formative years. And I'm a very, 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 very different person than I was back then to who I am now. And, when you're growing up together and you're trauma bonded because of that's just a term that you use when you're in addiction together and that kind of thing. It's a misnomer really, because all it means is that you have extremely strong bonds due to the shared experiences that you have. And when you have shared experiences with somebody spanning over a decade of the most important years of your life, and you have such strong experiences like ayahuasca trips and going around the world together, and as well as all everything else in between, like you're just so strongly bonded in a very different way. And so I guess that probably contributes to why we were able to stay friends after. But anyway, what I was trying to say was, when you grow up and you grow apart and you just go on very different paths, there isn't like an animosity. You just kind of say we're different now. And yeah, I think for me that's really what it came down to. And I tried to explain this in the early days of when we were splitting up, but I never really did it justice, or I couldn't explain it well, and I don't think I can right now. But
it was a great explanation.
The love kind of just changes, it's the love changes from something that's like romantic in that way to like just this deep bond. It's a different kind of love. You're still connected, but it's just different. Anyway,
that was
probably
perfectly said, and it's basically exactly correct. If I can add to it from my point of view as a man, I think what happened is, I was on a rocket acceleration, right? When I was young, I'm successful, got entrance scholarships, a lot of big scholarships, the biggest scholarships, got a bunch of degrees. I accidentally got 2 degrees. I mean, who does that? And I got a master's degree and so forth. So for her, being an ambitious person with a trajectory in life, I was a good fit. And we were what was called a power couple. I remember our friend Erica called us a power couple. Right, we were both getting a master's degree. We were going to have this super bright future. I was originally working in the private sector in social research, and I think a big part of it, honestly, was that didn't work out. I think if that had worked out, things might have gone on a different track. but I had a really toxic and, in my opinion, evil and sociopathic boss. And she just made the job so miserable for me that I had to resign just because the quality of life was terrible, even though it was an incredibly lucrative, prestigious job with infinite future in my field, right? I was working as a social researcher in a prestigious private research corporation. I got a very competitive job. I had a BlackBerry in office. Like, it would have worked great, I think, if that had been just a really great boss who actually mentored me and trained me. That would have created a trajectory. Instead, that kind of set us back. And I think, that caused me some stress. And that was sort of, in my opinion, kind of the beginning of it. And then I was coping with my emotional issues and staying off drugs by getting obsessed with like MMA, right? So I was doing lots of time at the gym, and I think Andi really respects that, but it's not her focus. It doesn't mean as much to her as it does to me, right? Fighting and stuff. So I think she thought, I was hoping he'd go into politics or business or something like that. And I think that might have been different. And in the end, I realized I do want to do that. And ironically, now we've ended up with identical goals in the sense that we both set the goal for ourselves of going into the defense industry or defense policy. She wants to do aerospace defense policy. I want to do intelligence or defense policy or military or something in that general area of just, researching strategy or whatever. So ironically, we did end up with the same goals again, but I think the reason we broke up is largely because for a while it didn't appear that we would. And I think she just thought, this isn't going to be the kind of marriage that I need or want to continue the life that I had planned. And unfortunately, I would say, if I can say there's one criticism I have, which is obviously not meant as a criticism, but just as a warning or a guide for other people, is, if you're open with the communication, like I do think if you had said to me years earlier, like, this is what I need you to do in order for this to work, I know I would have done it. It was just that I think people, they let it just kind of drift apart. They don't have like staff meetings as a marriage. They don't plan their goals and write it down and say, are we moving where we want to go? And so you just get comfortable and you don't talk as much as you should and you drift apart. So that's just what I would add to it. But I don't know what do you think about what I said? Is that fair?
No, that's legit. That sounds good. I think that's a good accurate description. To answer the question about do I have any tips or tricks for how to stay friends, I think it just comes down to what relationship you had to begin with, and the way that it ended. If it ended with infidelity or something like that, it's pretty hard to stay friends. But because that wasn't our story, we were able to. So I feel very lucky.
I feel extremely lucky, and I think the decision to stay friends was one of the best decisions I've ever made, and I hope you feel the same way. And I'm really glad it worked out that way, and this podcast is a wonderful example of the value of that, because, again, not to bring it down to this level, but the people who said these things did it because they didn't think I'd ever be able to have my ex-wife come on and explain the truth. They were assuming our relationship wouldn't be like that. And so they were thinking they could say whatever they want and I wouldn't be able to disprove it and people would believe it and they could destroy my reputation through you. But because I stayed friends with you and because we have a great relationship and mutual love and respect, you were able to just come and tell the truth. And all these people can hear the truth and see our faces and know everything, right? So it's a beautiful story, really, of how we can still have each other's back without being married. Still have an important relationship, an alliance. I would say it's an alliance. That's a great way to describe it, an alliance. And the one thing I love that you said is the reason we were able to stay the kind of friends is because we were best friends first. So we had a romantic relation, a sexual relation, an emotional relation, and every level of love. But the base of it was a best friendship. We hung out, we smoked weed, we watched cartoons, we played hacky sack, we went to music festivals. We were best friends.
Yeah.
And that was a beautiful gift, and it's a beautiful gift I still have because you're still in my life. You're still my friend. We talk every day, and I'm grateful for that. And hopefully we can meet up in Ontario and go out for a beer, and hopefully you can take Guffey if and when I do go into another line of work. So I think this has been a great podcast. I want to ask you if you have any closing thoughts or reflections. But before that, maybe I'll just say, is there one more question that's truly good or worth asking? If not, we can wrap it up here.
No, there's not.
Okay, so that's a perfect time to end. Andi, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time out of your busy schedule to do this. I'm sorry that these people tried to involve you in their toxic Discord petty bullshit. You should never be involved in this kind of nonsense. Nobody should. Shame again on the people who try to slander innocent people through lies. Thank you, though, for being here to tell the truth. It means the world. And also, this was a great podcast. And I hope you'll come again, and we'll get your defense policy think tank episode up as well. Do you have any closing thoughts that you want to leave people with from the roundtable or on the BitChute or YouTube channels?
Just that, thanks for coming to listen. This community that you folks have built here is a remarkable thing. And yeah, you're all really wonderful for creating this space for folks to come and tell their stories and feel safe. So thank you thanks to the whole roundtable family.
Thank you so much. I love you, and
I love
thanks
you.
for everything. So thank you all for joining. This has been the Roundtable Podcast. I think we'll do another episode, maybe even tonight, on Gematria at 8 or 9 p.m., which is, again, Hebrew numerology. Tomorrow, join us for the podcast with Black Feathers, which is about survivalism and doomsday prepping. Hopefully you could even join us for that one. Again, thank you for taking your time. This has been fascinating. You're welcome on the podcast and in the chat anytime. You can join and hang out. You're at night now, so you can just mute anybody that bothers you, but nobody should hear. So also welcome to the mod team. Whether you use the server or not, you can use this account anytime to use it. That being said, thanks again for joining me. I'll let you go. Thanks you for giving us of your time. Everyone, for Kasheka, Dawson, for asking the questions. And that'll be it for now. So let's jump to, actually, we're in the pub, so all we got to do is end the recording, but make sure you join the Roundtable Discord server and follow us in our podcast and subscribe on YouTube and BitChute. This will be uploaded post-haste and probably be available for anyone who missed it on the RT Podcast channel. I hope you guys will help spread this podcast and the truth behind it far and wide so that we can finally put an end to this toxic era of rumor mongering and slander and lying, which has been trying to oppress this wonderful server since the beginning. But that is now behind us, thanks to this wonderful woman. So thank you all, and that is it for now. God bless.
Bye.
Bye.